Chap Chapter 4 Steerforth. Dr. Strong's school was very different from Salem House. The headmaster, Dr. Strong, was an excellent teacher and an intelligent man. He enjoyed teaching and never punished anyone. I liked the new school immediately and made friends with the other boys and with the teachers too. I lived at Mr. Wickfield's house, and his daughter, Agnes, was like a sister to me. She often helped me with my studies. Mr. Wickfield was sad because his wife was dead, but Agnes did everything to help him because she loved him very much. These were happy years for me. However, I didn't like Uriah Heep, who was studying to be a lawyer. He had such an ugly smile, and he moved his body like a snake. As time passed, he began to have a strange power over Mr. Wickfield. "Perhaps one day you'll be Mr. Wickfield's partner," I said to him.
"Oh no, Master Copperfield,"
cried Uriah.
"I could never rise so high. I'm much too humble for that. But thank you, Master Copperfield, for thinking kindly of me. Please come to visit me and my mother in our humble home."
For some reason, I didn't feel comfortable with Uriah Heep. However, one day I went to his home for tea and met his mother. She was exactly like her son, unpleasant. During this time I met the Micawbers, who moved from Plymouth to Canterbury. I was very glad to see them, but unfortunately they still had bad money problems. At the age of 17, I completed my studies at Dr. Strong's school. On that occasion, my aunt said,
"Why don't you go on a holiday before you choose your profession? You need a rest."
I was now a young adult with an education and some money, so I decided to go and visit London for a few days. Then I planned to go to Yarmouth to see Peggotty and her family. In London, I was very surprised to meet my friend Steerforth, who didn't recognize me at first.
"Goodness!"
he exclaimed.
"It's little Copperfield. What are you doing in London? I haven't seen you since we were at Salem House."
"I've just finished school and I decided to take a short holiday before I decide on my future," I explained. "What about you?"
"Well, I'm studying at Oxford University, where nothing exciting ever happens, so I often come to London,"
he said cheerfully.
"Have you visited London yet?"
"No, not yet," I replied. We went sightseeing in London for a few days, and then I invited him to come to Yarmouth with me. He accepted my invitation happily. I still admired Steerforth greatly. When we got to Yarmouth, everyone was delighted to see me. I introduced Steerforth to Peggotty, Daniel, Ham, and little Emily, who was now a beautiful young woman.
"Welcome to our home, gentlemen,"
said Daniel Peggotty, smiling.
"This is a very special day because little Emily and Ham are engaged. Ham is the perfect husband for Emily. He's a rough fisherman like me, but he's honest and sincere."
Steerforth and I congratulated them, and Steerforth kept looking at lovely Emily. We spent a pleasant evening in the old boathouse with the Peggotty family. As Steerforth and I were walking one evening, he said,
"Emily is such a beautiful girl. Why is she engaged to that stupid fisherman, Ham?"
I was shocked by these words and said, "You're not serious, are you, Steerforth?" He smiled at me and said,
"I'm not as good as you are, David. I hate myself sometimes."
"Steerforth, what are you saying?" I exclaimed. "You're the most intelligent man I know. I've always admired you, and I still do."
"Thank you, David,"
he said, shaking his head.
"But you don't know how bad I am."
I didn't believe him, and I soon forgot his words, but I remembered them later. We stayed in Yarmouth for 2 weeks, and I often spent time with Peggotty and Barkis while Steerforth went sailing or fishing with Ham or Daniel. When I got back to London, I met Aunt Betsy and we discussed my future.
David,
She said seriously.
would you like to become a lawyer?
I thought for a moment and replied, I've never considered that possibility, but I think so.
Good. Now come with me.
She said, quite satisfied. I followed her to Doctors' Commons, an area in London where lawyers have their offices. She introduced me to Mr. Spenlow, an important lawyer.
I'll give Mr. Spenlow £1,000 and you'll work with him and learn about the law. Then, after several years, you'll become a lawyer in Doctors' Commons. Do you like this idea?
Yes, Aunt Betsy, I said enthusiastically. Thank you. I promise to work very hard and do my best. I moved to London and rented a small flat. I was excited because I was beginning a new life. One day I invited Steerforth and his Oxford friends to dinner. We ate and drank a lot, and I was quite drunk. Then we went to see a play at the theatre, where I met Agnes Wickfield. Agnes! I shouted. You're in London!
David,
She whispered, smiling at me.
be quiet. You're at the theatre. Please ask your friends to take you home.
I took her advice, and Steerforth and his friends accompanied me home. The next day, I received a letter from Agnes which said,
Please come and visit me in London.
I went to see her after work and said, I'm very sorry for my bad behaviour last night, Agnes. I was drunk,
David, you'll always be my friend,
she said.
but stay away from Steerforth. He's a dangerous friend. He has a bad influence over you.
No, Agnes, I said. You're wrong. He's always been a good friend, and he helps me.
Oh, David, you're a good person, and you can't see certain things.
She said.
Please believe me. Stay away from Steerforth.
I looked at her kind eyes and said, I believe you, Agnes,
David, I need your help.
said Agnes nervously.
My father has serious problems. Uriah Heep is going to be my father's partner.
What? Uriah Heep? I exclaimed. That hypocrite! He's so terribly unpleasant, and I've never liked him. What's happening?
My poor father has no choice.
Said Agnes, with tears in her eyes.
He started drinking heavily after my mother died because he was unhappy. He was careless with his work, and Uriah did all the work that my father didn't do. And now my father needs him to keep his business going. Uriah wants to become his partner, and my father's afraid of him. I don't know what to do. Please help me, David.
Of course I'll help you, Agnes, I promised. I'll think of a good plan.